Hey guys, I want to use this new axe head that I sniped on eBay to talk about how to select an axe to restore for a project, and what I look for and how I evaluate an axe to see if it's worthwhile for a project. I've been using axes since I was a kid. We had a wood stove growing up, and always had a love of the axe. And now that I kind of have my own home and my own little workshop set up, it's really been a lot of fun restoring these axes. And if you're real smart, you can get these things for really cheap and make really fun projects for literally like $10 to $20 per axe. So let's get on with it. What do I look for? The first thing and the most important thing to me is that the eye is not damaged. If you're buying on eBay, if they're not including pictures of the eye, don't even consider it, because these can get damaged. These, this is pretty thin metal here, and a lot of these are 30, 40, 50, maybe even 60 or 70 years old. There can be damage to the eye. So if you can't see that there's not cracks or that it's not deformed in any way, you don't want to buy it. The last thing you want is to get an eye that's misshapen or something like that and have the axe be unsafe and waste your money. So if you're buying for eBay, make sure you get those pictures of the eye. If you're buying at a garage sale or something, luckily you'll have it right in front of you and you can look it over. So really important, make sure the shape is right, no damage, no cracks, and nothing that would cause an alarm as for safety. Second thing I look at is the pole. How damaged is it? Pretty much everybody back in the day used their axe as a tool. Today, a lot of bushcrafters, the axe is something a little more revered, as a great survival tool. So people wouldn't use their pole to smash other metal things, but back in the day, people used these as sledgehammers. These were utility items. So look at your pole and how damaged it is. If a person really hammers on this too much, it can affect the shape of your eye, it can affect the axe as a whole. So a little damage is okay and easy to repair. Too much, you got to be really careful of. So look at the pole, how mushroomed is it, how bad is the shape, and make a determination based on that. This one here, very manageable amount of mushrooming on that pole, and the back is not bad at all. That'll smooth out nicely. So after you look at the eye, the pole, one thing to consider is the the maker's mark. If you're doing this restoration as a something to keep, something to display and not to use, you definitely want to make sure that the maker's mark is something you can read and it's something that will restore well. This one here is a little worn, but I bought this as an axe to use, not as a axe to keep for any kind of value sake. So if you are looking for, maybe to keep an axe and as an investment, because they are, some of them restored are worth quite a bit of money. You definitely want a really good maker's mark, and make sure it's something that's not too light that's going to rub off with cleaning. One of the next things I look at is the patina. As you can see here, this one is a little on the pitted side, but it's got a good, nice, solid patina to it. All the shiny steel is well covered and protected. Rust is actually pretty minimal on this, mostly just in the pitting. So look at that. Some of them you'll see different steels, different companies. Some of them will just straight up rust. They won't develop this nice dark patina to it. They'll just become like a brown rust, and those ones nothing wrong with that, but I always make sure the patina, you can see enough to know how badly pitted it is. This one right here, it's pretty significant. It's going to take a lot of work to smooth that out. So, excuse me. If you don't want to do a lot of work, you definitely want to look for one that's a little smoother. This is going to be a lot of work, and you want to make sure you have the tools to complete the job. So, look at the patina. Next, overall, I look at is shape. Has it been modified? And you will see a lot of axes on eBay where people have damaged them and tried to fix it. Sometimes what will happen is, say maybe someone chips the axe head here. Someone will maybe grind it back and try and make it look like a tomahawk or do something creative with it. It never hurts to look up examples of, say if this one here's a Kelly, is to look up other examples and find out what it's supposed to look like. Another thing you can do is often places like eBay will give you measurements for the width and the length, and you can compare that online. There's plenty of websites that have the original width and length that these axes are supposed to be, so you can compare to see how bad the bit is worn. Is it close to its original length? Is there anything weird that has been modified? Trust me, guys, people did weird things back in the day with axes. Especially when they broke or got damaged, they would just, grind it and try and fix it. So you'll see a lot of axes on eBay that are really stubby. And it's because they've broken the blade and people just cut them off and reground them. But they don't realize is the steel back here is too soft to make it an effective axe. So you definitely want to look at the shape, make sure it's original. It's not been cut into, not ground, nothing funky done to it that could affect the performance. Typically you can look up the pattern of axe as well and the pattern of the head and compare it to others of that pattern to make sure it fits and that it is appropriate. Next is the edge. Are there chips? Are there dings? Minor chips are pretty acceptable. They come out pretty easy. Bigger chips, you're going to lose a lot of workable steel. This one here has some very minor chips, but overall not too bad. Also the shape. You need to know if the axe in its original form had a flat blade or a curved blade. How curved is the blade supposed to be? Many axes, like broad axes, have a flat blade to them. But what will happen is over time people will sharpen them and they become curved like this. So you definitely want to look at that edge and see, is it true to its original form? Some people sharpen very badly and you'll get uneven edges, or maybe one edge cuts in very suddenly just from bad sharpening technique over the years. So you want to look for that. Is the edge true to the original? Is it straight? Does it look like it's been damaged and repaired or anything like that? Especially those axes that maybe come in very sharply or have weird shapes to them. Always be suspicious of those, because even though it may not look broken, guys, you have to remember, someone may break it, regrind it, and then a nice patina forms over it and it looks original, like it's not damaged. Another very good thing to look at is the profile of the axe. What is the axe for? Is it a felling axe? Is it a splitting axe? Typically, the thinner the blade, the more of a chopper it's going to be. The more it's going to chop in and can be useful for felling woods. The thicker it is, the more wedge-like, the more better it is for splitting. This one is a good combination. It's got a little bit of a thicker bit to it, but it has a nice set of lines. It's a very smooth transition from the bit to the, I forgot what they're called, wings or whatever, where the part that surrounds the eye there. It's a nice smooth transition. So this would probably be a very good splitter and an okay chopper. So, but given the weight, 4 pounds, it's probably meant a little more on the splitting side than the chopping. But one thing you can do, of course, is take down some of the material and thin that out a little bit if you do want it to be a superb chopper. The edge of your blade should be convex. It shouldn't be flat ground or chisel ground or anything like that. People, like I said, a lot of people over the years didn't sharpen things correctly. So you want to check to see, is that edge sharpened correctly? Is it convexed correctly? It should appear, that's actually a pretty good edge. So if you can see that, if we can get that shadow out of the way, you can kind of see that. That's how your edge should look. It should be nice and smooth. There shouldn't be any rough things. The more of any kind of turns it takes are just going to cause friction in the wood and jam it up. So say you've decided to buy this and you throw your money down, you order it, it shows up in the mail. Now it's time to do a secondary look at this, because you haven't had a chance to do much with it. You just looked at pictures or maybe held it real quick at a garage sale. Now you got it home and it's time to decide, am I going forward with this or not? the first thing to do, in my opinion, is to test the steel. Now, how I do this, just take a file. As you can see, this one here is pretty dirty because I did do a little work on the pole. And what I will do is I'll take some material off the pole so I can get a feel. How soft is the metal? How workable is it? Then I'll go to the edge and do a little bit of work on the edge, and you can feel the difference, how much harder the edge is than the pole, and it should be. Your pole might be like a 40 to 45 on the Rockwell scale, whereas your edge might be anywhere between like 50 and 55, depending on the axe, and it'll give you a good gauge as to how good the steel is. This should be a lot harder than this. If they're very similar, odds are your temper is gone, or someone has worn it back so far that it's now into the softer steel. Typically, axes only harden back, 2 inches tops. So you only have a small amount of workable steel. If somebody wears that down, you're going to start getting into softer and softer steel. So I like to check. Do a couple runs on the pole, see how it feels, get a good feel for it. How does it react? Bring it to the edge. Bring it to the edge, see how the edge feels. And use that, and you'll get a pretty good idea as to how the steel is. And if you do this with enough axes, enough machetes, enough tools over the years, you get a really good feel for how good steel should react. A good steel will form an edge in a matter of minutes. Even if you have a really rounded off, beaten axe, it should only take you a couple of minutes to be able to get a bit of an edge on this. And if it's taking longer than that, or if you feel like the edge is just not forming, odds are you've got really soft steel and it's not going to form that edge. But you'll know over time. You do this enough, you'll know. Once you start biting into it, you'll have a good feel about the steel as to how it sharpens up. This one, amazingly, is actually probably the best steel of any of the axes I've gotten so far. I literally put a couple minutes into this edge, and this thing is just about razor sharp. Just file, and then I kind of stropped it a little bit on some, 220 grit sandpaper. So basically, after using the file, I just drag the blade across the sandpaper. Get that out of there. And just to smooth it out a little bit and get rid of the serrations that the file causes. And this thing's not quite taking hair sharp, but with a little work on a stone, this is going to be taking hair. In fact, it's actually sharp enough. As you can see, when I was kind of cleaning the edge, it does cut into a kitchen sponge, which I think that's a good gauge as to how sharp it is. The fact that it cuts something soft like this says it's actually pretty sharp. So great edge. Took a great edge really quick, so I know it's really good, hard, decent steel. Now, if it was soft steel, it'd be like this. Occasionally you can get a really sharp edge on soft steel, but it's going to roll around on you. When you go from one side to the other, it's going to completely misshape and all that. Whereas this, you work one side to the other, you're not taking a ton of steel off. It really keeps a good edge. You'll know. You will know. If you do it enough, you'll know. So, there you go. That's what I look for when I pick it. That's how I test it. The last thing I do is, if it passes the steel test, I will give it a little bit of sandpaper just to check and see how bad the pitting is. As you can see, just sandpaper took off most of the pitting. You can actually see the line where I stopped sanding. And a lot of that pitting's gone just from a couple minutes of sandpaper. So this axe is actually going to be a go-ahead, and I'm going to do a full restoration on it. So there you go. That's what I look for and how I test and decide whether this is worth putting a couple hours into to restore.